everybody. Welcome back to another episode of SGU Uncut. It's Leah here with Jack for our second week of Summer Slump, where we will be talking about consistency and keeping consistency. So, Jack, I think you've been on once before, correct? Have you been on the podcast once before? Yeah. But could you just introduce yourself to all of our friends over in SGU?
Yeah, my name is Jack Guidera. I just graduated from University of Maryland down in College Park, but I've grew up in Nativity my whole life, so it's awesome being back.
Yes, we're so happy to have Jack here and all of his wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us today. So last week was all about intentionality, a little bit of a recap here, all about being intentional, about keeping Christ at the center of our life. And this week is about consistency. So we can be intentional, but it's about keeping it consistent in our lives. So before we even jump into those questions, I just want to know, what are you excited about this summer? This is all about summer. What are you excited about doing this summer?
Excited about a lot of things, especially after being a graduated college student. It's just fun to have that freedom. But I'm going to the beach next weekend. So my family's renting a beach house for about a month. But I'm just getting a weekend, 4th of July. So it'll be really fun to go down there.
Don't get too sunburned.
Yeah.
If you're anything like me, lobster all the way. But that's super exciting.
Yeah.
So to jump right into our consistency, let's start with, what do you keep consistent in your life, like on a day-to-day basis? Is there anything that you do outside of like church and stuff like that you like have consistent in your life? Like every single day you have to have it.
Yeah. I would say a habit I picked up in high school when I was swimming earlier in the mornings was drinking coffee. So that's something I've carried on through college as well, getting me through classes and stuff.
Yeah, mine is Netflix. I think a lot of people probably have that one. Like you watch a lot of TV or Disney Plus too. It's all in there. Where it's like, it's one of those everyday sort of things. But, with keeping consistency, it's so easy to keep consistent with the things that like don't necessarily, I guess, grow our spiritual journey and like our spiritual faith. And so, looking at that, like that becomes our second nature. Like you're gonna get up, and drink your coffee. I'm gonna probably go to sleep and watch Netflix. It's like it becomes your consistent second nature. And so the goal of today specifically is to look at making our relationship with Christ our second nature, right? We talked about last week being intentional with our relationship, but this week it's just about keeping it consistent and making it our second nature, more so than coffee or Netflix, which might seem hard for some people. I can tell you it's hard for me too. But yes, so that's our goal. So we're going to start with a Bible verse here where it's from 1 Corinthians, and it says, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be firm, steadfast, always fully devoted to the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." So it's hard to be consistent, right? I mean, do you have any experience with that, like a little experience with being consistent?
Yeah, I think just in terms of my faith life and spiritual life, it's definitely hard to be consistent.
It's not easy.
In the age we live in, we're so distracted with our phones, with like Netflix, just things like that. We're constantly entertained, and sometimes the spiritual life cannot be as entertaining.
Right.
Of like going to mass, going to pray every day, going to read the scriptures. Doesn't seem as entertaining or as fun as other things we could be doing. So for me, definitely in college, it was really hard to transition. Maybe habits I had built up during the school year. Maybe you're doing small group and you're trying to pray consistently, going to small group every week, and now it's harder over the summer because you change your environment back home and you don't really know where to start, and you just have all these exciting, fun things that we talked about coming up. So for me in the summers, I think prayer life was the first thing that went out the window.
Right.
If you wake up in the summer, I had work all day. I was a swim coach for 3 years. So that would be the hardest thing for me to do, is actually keeping consistent with the prayer life.
Right. Because sometimes the things that are most comfortable to us, like even our religion and our faith and our prayer life and stuff, kind of takes that back burner. We talked about that last week, where like sometimes it takes the back burner. So I totally understand. But if like we look at this Bible verse, and what at least jumps out to me, and I would love to hear your opinion in a second, is that we're pursued. We are so pursued by God, and our hearts are pursued. And he is longing for us to pursue him in a way. And though it's not easy to be a Christian in modern day culture, which it's really not, like we are called to pursue because it's not in vain. It's our pursuing God's heart is not in vain, because at the end of the day, we're not meant for this world. We're meant for heaven. So I would love to get your opinion on the Bible verse.
I love this Bible verse, and I think it ties back to what you were talking about last week about intentionality, of living with the end in mind, of knowing what your goal is. And with this Bible verse talks about your goal being heaven. And if your goal is heaven and to be a saint, then everything else becomes in that perspective of how you're living your life on a daily basis. As well as just on the daily basis of like what habits are you forming and how are you living with Christ. As a people of God in our church, we're seen as like kind of the spouse of Christ. And you think that kind of spousal relationship, or any type of really deep abiding relationship with someone, you're supposed to live with them on a daily basis and not just have a few minutes with them here and there.
Right.
It's like, what's that intentional time you're having to sit face to face with someone you love?
Right.
Like in a spouse, like they pursue you, they want to love you, and just give everything they want, everything of their life for you.
Right.
In the same way Christ pours himself out for us every day,
Right.
and did on the cross. And the response we get to make and get to have every day is, how am I going to do that? Like, give that back to him.
Exactly.
How am I going to pour myself back out for Christ every day?
Exactly. And that's not easy.
Yeah.
It's really not, because we're not encouraged to do that in society.
But one of the really inspiring things, and just gives me a lot of hope, is something I think St. Thomas Aquinas said, is grace builds upon nature.
Yeah.
So grace works upon our own habits and the things that we do, even though as humans and as like broken people, we can't love perfectly, and we never will be able to.
Right.
But by living in relationship with Christ, he actually transforms us, and he gives us the ability to love supernaturally and live supernaturally like we wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Exactly. I kept hearing the word that you were saying was habits. And that kind of leads us into I call it the 3 Ps. It's our next little section here, and forming the habits to be able to be consistent with our relationship with Christ. And these 3 Ps, which is pausing and having presence and remaining in prayer, they're really meant for all of those little things. Of course, the big things too, like the big decisions, but it's one of those things that you had said, like if you start to foster it with the little things, that it'll become like something it's the second nature, right? So what are your thoughts on these 3 Ps where you are called to pause in those moments, just in every daily moment, and to have that presence and to remain in prayer? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just love these 3 Ps. I think they really encapsulate how you can live out the spiritual life on a daily basis. In terms of pause, one of the best ways to pause, I think, is just when you wake up in the morning, what are you doing? Right. I mean, for me, like a lot of times second nature can be wake up and you just look at your phone.
Exactly.
And you're just on social media, on your text messages, on like emails or whatever schoolwork you have to do. Just that's the first thing you start your day with. But there's an opportunity we have with every day to wake up and to offer our day to God. And there's a really beautiful prayer called the morning offering. That is just an incredible way to say, okay, I wake up, and the first thing I'm going to do is to dedicate my entire day and everything I do to Christ.
Right.
Even if sometimes I might let it slip, like, on my mind, or not really remember him all the time throughout the day. It really brings us this, like, anchor of, like, why we're living and who we're living for.
Right. And going back to what you were saying about habits, there are positive and negative habits in everybody's life. And that's one of those things that if you start implementing into your day, that will become so fruitful and so positive, whether people see it right away or not. So I love that you just said that. And that advice is just so good. Like, that is so wonderful. And it's hard. It's not easy to remain consistent. And the 3 Ps actually have helped me, I mean, specifically, because I'll find myself in the car saying, like, oh, Lord, you know what my day's going to look like. Just please give me the grace to continue to go through it, you know, and to go through it with your love. You know, it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy, seriously.
Yeah, and there was a talk I was listening to probably a couple months ago by Jason Everett, if you know who he is.
I love Jason Everett,
But he talked about really looking at the way we live our lives in our daily schedules and doing violence to our schedules.
Right.
He talks about Christ going into the temple and getting all the money changers out of there and having that, like, kind of righteous anger. In a way, like, we can see the bad habits we have and invite Christ into those to kind of drive those out. Even though that might, just praying with that and seeking, okay, looking at your, like, how you live your life on a daily basis, just noticing what are the ways I can kind of do violence to my schedule to learn how to, like, sacrifice and to love better.
Right.
Because in learning how to love Christ better in our daily life, we also learn how to love our friends better, our family better. If we're in a relationship, learn how to love our boyfriend or girlfriend more in a better way.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're right. Like, and you got to pursue that. You got to pursue that. And that's part of where it comes back into, like, what we were talking about earlier, pursuing that relationship with Jesus. Because if you pursue that, then he will come into your heart and rid all those habits. Because if it's not of joy and of goodness, it's not of God, sort of thing. So that's just wonderful. So looking back, this is my last question for you. Looking back at these 3 Ps right here, how can you commit to consistency with Christ at the center of your life? And this is also a question that I want to ask to you all, like, while Jack's answering, just to kind of reflect, like, what is something that you guys can do to commit to these 3 Ps and the consistency with Christ at the center of your life, not just for the summer, but that's what we're focusing on this summer, but really for the rest of your days. So that's my question to you. So what can you do to commit to those, you know, the 3 Ps and the consistency and putting them at the middle of your life? Yeah,
one thing that I've had to work on and trying to do when I'm back home from school is ties into presence, but also prayer. Is really how am I letting Christ come in contact with me every day and to be with me. And with presence especially, it's in the sacraments. So in confession, in the Eucharist, And we can really have Christ be present with us throughout our daily lives in the sacraments, whether it's scheduling confession, like I'm going to go once every 3 weeks to go let Christ, heal me in the places where I'm broken.
That consistent schedule, right?
It's really, once you have it like in your schedule, it's like, okay, no matter what, I'm going to go at this time, at this day, like once a month.
Exactly.
Or even like going to daily mass like twice a week. Maybe there's a parish, like here we have it at I think 5 or 5:30 p.m. Maybe you get off work and you're like, hey, I can stop by daily mass. It's like 20, 30 minutes long.
Yeah, nothing too much. Right?
But it's a way of letting Christ come in contact with you on a daily basis.
Right.
And as well as prayer, of like actually scheduling that out, of like looking at your schedule and like, okay, when do I have work? When do I have other commitments? And saying, where am I going to put prayer in and actually make this a priority?
Exactly.
And that's been a challenge for me, but it's also awesome to have accountability with that as well. Right. Having a community of friends, like my brother and I, will go to daily mass and go pray together almost every morning.
That's
so it's
awesome.
just really awesome to have someone to be doing it with and to keep you accountable for that relationship.
That's wonderful. And again, you were talking about, making that consistent. That becomes our second nature, making that a consistent thing. And that scheduling, it's going to be the second nature. Mm-hmm. And so I just really appreciate just everything you had to say. And just thank you for coming on this podcast and, sharing all your, experience and testimony with all of us here at SGU. We appreciate you. Yeah. Now, for you all, we will see you all next week for week 3 of Summer Slump. Thank you again. We just really enjoy having you here, and we hope you come back to film with us again.
Thank you.
We hope that our conversation fueled your conversation, my apologies, and that you guys have a fantastic week. We'll see you next week for week 3.